Coming up on Unpacked.
I wasn't really looking for a relationship.
And he comes out of nowhere and says, hello.
He just told me, like, you and I are dating.
He takes on this role of being a provider to you.
Verbal turned into physical now. Like, he started beating on me.
I was told that we're no longer going to be using protection.
Infected with HIV by a partner who knew that they were positive. Today's guests are here to share their stories. Let's unpack. The death of Zandile, Simelane's mother, saw her rebel through her grief and hurt. Her rebellion spiraled out of control and saw her finding solace in the arms of a sugar daddy whose intentions were anything but sweet. Kimberley-born Matthew Lani is a psychology student who was raised by a single mother. In 2019, he realized that what glitters is not gold when things in his relationship took a turn for the worst in a web of lies and deceit that changed his life forever. This is part one of their stories. Let's unpack. Welcome to the show, Zandile. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And to yourself, Matthew, as well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with you, Zandile. Take me back to, your upbringing. There was a period in your life where you had, a major loss. What happened?
So at the age of, of 13, I lost my mother, who was a single parent. And basically my mother raised me, and it was just her and I for the 13 years of my life. And when she passed away, towards the end of, in the beginning of I think I was in grade 7. And then that's when everything began. That's when the being lost, being all over the place, because all of a sudden here's this major and only support structure that I've had my whole life is no more.
So what happened after mom died? Because you were actually not even in South Africa at the time.
Yes, so I was in Swaziland. I was in Eswatini, and immediately after mom passed away, I then moved back to South Africa, where I was born initially. And when I moved back to South Africa, I lived with my guardian, which is my mother's sister, and she basically raised me. So for the first 2 years, I was with her, and the second year I went to boarding school. She took me to boarding school. Now, I think that's also where everything else began, because I then became very rebellious. I think most of it was caused by the loss and not actually talking about it. Nobody actually sat me down to say, Zandile, your mother is no longer alive. So therefore, there's going to be some changes in your life, or do this, do that for you to be able to survive and grow. So I just found myself hopping from one relative to another, even after my guardian took me. Because there's a time where I think in the second year she said, look, I can't do this anymore. I have raised you, but you are a mess. And I was a mess. But that mess was caused by this underlying issue that I had not dealt with. And because of that, in the second year, in that boarding school that I was in Durban, I started, I think because I was lost and feeling alone and I was far away from everyone, I started writing suicide notes. I began being very suicidal, and I started cutting myself. On my arm here, I have ink now, but there was quite a number of scars that were self-inflicted, and I guess it was just me expressing myself through this. And I landed in a psychiatric hospital, Eddington Hospital in Durban for about 2 weeks. That was something. That was definitely something, because here I was, again, lost, and still the issue was not being dealt with. Because in the 2 weeks that I was there, I don't remember having an actual solid conversation as to why I'm here and what do I think is best for me to overcome whatever led me to being.
Yeah. So when you say you were a mess, what was happening in your life, or what was it that you were doing that you say made you a mess?
I think having to deal with the loss of my mother on my own, and not knowing how to behave. I was lost. Remember, she was my only support structure for all of my life. And all of a sudden, she's no longer around. So I think now also, because I'm an adolescent, and I'm adolescent stage. So I think that also then creeped in, and with no support structure, you can imagine how all over the place one then becomes. Obviously, there was the drinking and smoking at school. I eventually got kicked out of the school I came back to from South Africa, coming back to Swaziland. I went to a festival on a Friday, and I was in boarding school, mind you, and I did not have permission to leave the school premises. And this had become a norm. I had been doing this continuously. And that one weekend for this festival, I left on a Friday, and I came back on Tuesday. And not Sunday when everyone else
came back.
I came back on Tuesday. So you can imagine, and because all of a sudden, no one is really controlling me. So
So now the relevance, of course, of us sharing the background of your story builds up to you meeting this person. Tell us about that.
Of course. So now I've been kicked out of school, and my guardian, my mother, who then took over after my biological mother passed away, and my grandmother sort of came in to try and save me. But it was after being kicked out of school, they were just like, you know what, we're tired. We're tired of you. We don't, so I had to look for the next school, which was in grade 11. So I had to find my own school. Luckily, I had aid for school fees. I just had to apply for it, and it would be sent to school. So now I'm doing all this process alone, where in the past couple of years, I've always had their support as family members. And now, obviously, because the support is limited, I can do this and I can't do that. I have certain restrictions, and I don't have access to the support I need financially, to whether it was for school toiletries or groceries, because I'm going to another boarding school now, of which I did find a school myself, and I did enroll myself into a school, because their assumption was I did not want to be at school, you know?
And this was based on the observations of your behavior.
And it totally made sense. I mean, the last school, when I got kicked out, because the aid then pays for the whole year, they had overpaid, and when I left, they gave me back my change. That's how much they were done with me. So now I'm trying to enroll myself in the school. I'm trying to get myself to school. And that's when I meet this human being. I remember I was standing at a mall, and I had set everything out, but I had run out of funds, the same change that I received. They had run out, and I was trying to get to school now. Schools are opening, and I really want to go to school. And I'm standing at the mall and with my suitcase. And he comes out of nowhere and says, "Hello," very tall gentleman. At least at the time, he deserved to be called a gentleman. He says, "What's your name? Why are you standing here?" So I tell him my name, and I'm going to school. He says, "Where's school?" I tell him where school is. He says, "How do you plan on getting there? Are you waiting for someone to pick you up?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm going to school." It was maybe 50 to 100 kilometers from where I was. So he says, "Okay, so you're going to school and you don't have a plan?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay." He took my number. He said, "I'll call you in a bit. Let me figure something out." So now this person is a complete stranger and is willing to help. And at this point, I really need the help. So I open up to actually allowing him to help. And he calls me and he says, "There's a taxi, a cab, We call them taxis in Zandile. There's a taxi parked outside. Its registration is this and this. Go into it. It'll take you where you need to go. If you're saying you're going to where you're saying you're going. I said, okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And indeed, that taxi did drop me off where I was going. Now, here's what this driver says. He says, here's money. I was told to give this money to you if you're going to where you're saying you're going. And at the time, that was 500. 500 is a lot of money for a grade 11 student who has nothing to her name, really, except wanting to go to school. She says, here's 500. You can do with it whatever you need. So I was like, oh, thank you very much. And then later that evening, he rang me again to find out if I had arrived safely and so forth. Very grateful again. I kept saying thank you. And he says to me, I noticed you did not have groceries. You said you were going to a boarding school. I noticed you didn't have your basics, or was it in the suitcase? Because not all your clothes would have fit in there. I said, no, I don't. So now I start elaborating as to how I got here and why I don't have these. And he says, okay, send me a list and I will purchase them for you. Again, thank you. I remember, I think I sent a list of about 4 things, just probably sanitary towels, basic toiletries. The weekend at school, he came and there was like a trunk full of everything and anything. I remember I had complained saying the water in the area is not great. And there was like 5 liters of water, just 5 liters of water to help, and a whole lot of other things that I did not ask for.
So just to clarify, at this point, right, you are how old? Because grade 11 is 16, 17.
17, yes.
So you're 17.
I was 17.
And this person is a man. How old was he about at the time?
He was about 43.
Okay.
44.
No, just so we establish the inappropriateness.
Yes, of everything.
Of the whole thing. And not just inappropriate. Eventually, when it becomes sexual, it's illegal.
More inappropriate.
Yes. So just, and I'm speaking in the South African context. I'm not clear at this stage what the legalities are.
Same.
It's the same in Swaziland. Okay, so now he takes on this role of being a provider to you in need, but he's fully aware that you're school going.
Yes.
So let's fast forward to it becoming a relationship.
So remember, I've been kicked out of home and I was told, very clearly instructed, not to go to so-and-so, not to go to so-and-so and all the other relatives because I'm a problem.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, he is the only one and the only person I can see or visit. So a couple of weeks after that, there came a time where we had to go home for the weekend. And now I don't have a place to go except this person. And remember, this person has been calling every day and we're having conversations and I'm telling him, again, how I got here and I'm giving him a bit of a background. And he's being very supportive emotionally and financially, a whole lot.
Which you needed.
Which I needed, a lot of financial support. And there comes a time where I'm supposed to visit, and I do. Now, my weekend is, I'm going to spend my weekend with him. And he says, so I'm Seventh-day Adventist, which I also am. I'm Seventh-day Adventist, so we go to church on Saturdays. I think where I realized this had gone too far was when he would, you see these 2 pieces that our mothers used to wear to church.
Yes.
Now he's buying me those 2 pieces. Now, I don't know whether he was trying to make me look older or at least fit and not raise too many eyebrows in church, because it's quite obvious. This girl is young, this man is very old, and he was known that he's divorced and so forth and so forth. He's got kids. So he's a very grown man. And it's a relationship, and we are together when on weekends.
So you guys were actually now dating?
We're now dating.
Because I wanted to understand if, was this a person you looked up to as like a father figure? You called him Uncle so-and-so, or from the onset, you understood, and we are clear, you don't actually have capacity at that point because you were a child.
Yes.
But for you, you understood what his intention was with you.
Very clearly so.
Okay.
I understood, and I think I did not want to also reject because I needed the support.
Yes.
In as much as I also knew how inappropriate it was.
Yes.
And in my vulnerable state, letting go of that arrangement would obviously affect me negatively. So the relationship went on, and there came a time now he does not want to use protection. Remember, we've started dating and we are having sex, and now he doesn't want to use protection.
I'm going to pause you there because this is actually where there's similarities in the both of your stories. I mean, Matthew,
Right.
you actually also met somebody while you happened to be in a time of need.
Yeah.
So chat us through how you and your then partner met and what the circumstances were like at the time.
So I was staying with my mother. This was like in 2019.
And you were how old at the time?
At the time, I was 20 years old. So I was staying with my mother, who was a single mother. She was working as a domestic worker. And it was around November when I met my ex. And then my mother lost her job. So I was still in university. I was doing my fourth year. So we had to make a decision. It's either I go back to my mother to the Northwest, where we are originally from.
Is it because Mama, as a domestic worker, was staying at the home
Yes.
of where she was working, and that's where you were staying as well?
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Yes.
So, accommodation finished, everything finished. So I knew that if I went back to Christiana, which was in the Northwest, like my whole entire dreams and my schooling would actually just, stop. So I made the decision, okay, I need to find a way to actually stay in Johannesburg. And then it happened that I was at the mall as well. And I was buying, cough mixtures. And then I met him in the queue. Very presentable, very bubbly, amazing personality, And I wasn't really looking for a relationship, but, his personality was just out there. So we exchanged numbers and we started talking for about a week. And this was a week leading up to my mother arranging to go to the Northwest. And then I told him about the situation that I was in, that I was, I'm in this situation and I don't want to go back to the Northwest, and I'm trying to apply for funding and accommodation, but they're not going to respond in time. And he was working a very good job. He was 26 at the time. He was very well off, So he then said to me, okay, don't worry, because I stay alone, you can come and stay with me.
This is from meeting the person. Wow.
From meeting the person. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I did not tell my mother that I'm going to be staying with just some person I met. I told my mother that, oh, no, school. They replied. They said, they're going to accommodate me, so
Yes.
you don't need to worry.
Yeah.
So she left, and I went and moved in with him. The relationship was okay, It was, a fun...
So it immediately became a relationship. It wasn't somebody saying, Shem, you're in need. I'm going to provide you with a room in my place. It was, come stay with me as my person.
Exactly. And he literally, he did not, shell me or anything. He just told me, you and I are dating. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And, at that time, I thought it was kind of cute type of thing that, oh, okay, we're dating.
This is nice. Yeah.
This is nice. And so I started staying with him. He started helping me with my tuitions. He started paying my transport, clothing. He gave me an allowance. And, okay, everything was okay. I settled down. Everything was okay. And then a couple of months went, which we entered into 2020 now. And then things started changing. I think it was maybe around March of 2020 where his demeanor started changing. He started changing. She was just acting up, fighting for no reason. And then I started snooping around as well through his phone, and he was cheating. So every time I would confront him, it would always be a verbal argument. Verbal turned into physical now, where now I was starting, like he started beating on me, you know, and it just came to a point where I was like, I'm the problem. You know, and he also used to tell me that, you know, I am ungrateful and that, you know, he has done so much for me and I have the audacity to question him, even if he was cheating on me, so what? Because at the end of the day, I'm sleeping in his house, I'm wearing him, I'm eating him. You know, my mother is useless. She can't, you know, provide for me or anything. And I started believing all of that, and I just was like, okay, it is what it is, you know?
And of course, in a situation like that, you're kind of trapped.
I was trapped. I was because I did not want to be homeless. There was no other alternative. My friends, when they started noticing that I was actually being, you know, abused, because I'd go to school with lousy makeup on, they would see that something is wrong. And I would go to school with, you know, bruises. Like I would go to school with black eye and all of that. And my friends, you know, would tell me to leave this person. But, you know, I did not listen to them because, you know, like on campus, there's always that competition. You know, you have to look good. You have to wear nice things. And I also wanted to match with the others. So I just kind of like, I just stayed. I stayed because I really needed him and I depended on him.
So let's pick up on your side. You're saying that he reached a point where he started to not want to use protection.
Correct.
Up until that point, I mean, you've mentioned how your family basically disowned you because they were saying, we're not going to support you. Does it mean they were not featuring at all?
So I come from a very big family.
Yeah.
I'm the last of 13.
Yes.
So there was one sister who...
As in your mother's children or as in your cousins?
My cousins.
Okay, your cousins.
My cousins, yes. So, but in our culture, cousins is brothers
siblings.
and sisters,
Yes.
But now siblings, yes, I am the last one of 13 brothers and sisters.
From dads?
From dads, yes.
Okay, but these people were not really featuring much?
Were not featuring much.
Okay.
But there was one who was really there throughout and actually met this person during our very brief relationship.
Yes.
They would liaise with each other when it came to my visits and my groceries and so forth. So there was that one person. But before that, really, nobody was for me. Nobody. And I understood.
Yeah.
I really understood.
What was your sister's view of the relationship?
She's the type of person that says, if it makes you happy, do you. But it doesn't make me happy, and this is why. But of course, I think also in that position, she couldn't do as much as he was doing. And maybe to an extent, she understood why I was in that situationship.
Yeah.
So she was against it, but she really couldn't do much. She's one person who says, do what you feel is best for you.
Yeah.
And that's basically where she was.
Okay, so now he says to you he doesn't want to use protection. What was his reason?
He didn't give me a reason. He didn't give me... It wasn't an option.
Yeah.
I was told that we're no longer going to be using protection, and that's just that. I think I did not understand... I didn't think it through and did not understand the magnitude of what he was saying and what it meant.
Yeah.
And I just went with it.
Yeah.
I just went with it. I was not on any contraceptives, or I wasn't, because I was young, and access to contraception was not as easy as it is probably now, or rather better than it. So a couple of months after that, so the relationship beginning of the year, So a couple of months after that, we broke up.
And what was the reason?
We broke up because the one time I had just closed school, I think it was June holidays. I had just closed school, and instead of going to him at work after I came back into town, I went to see a couple of friends. And we had a few drinks. And remember, he doesn't drink alcohol. So I thought, let me get this time to just catch up with a couple of friends from my previous school and have a few drinks. And when I was supposed to be picked up by his personal assistant, I refused. I said, I'll find my way home. So she left. And I stayed there with my friend and got drunk. So when my friend dropped me off later, I remember he opened the window. It was a double-story duplex flat. He opened the window at the top and he said, can I help you? What do you want? My friend said, I'm so sorry, we brought her late, this and that excuse. And he said, I don't need her in my house. She must go. Look how wasted she is. I was sitting on the pavement, not so far from that. And he didn't want me in his house. And he said, I must leave. So now, leave and go where? Was the question. So they managed to beg him, and he said, okay, she can come in, but she has to leave tomorrow. So I came in, and I slept on the couch. I didn't go to the bedroom. I slept on the couch, and with all my stuff, remember, I've just closed school. I've just come back from school, from boarding school. And I slept on the couch. I think I slept for about an hour. And another friend who heard I was in town called, and I said, come fetch me. Please come and save me. Remember, I'm also still drunk, so my decisions are quite hazy. And I left. And that's the day I left his house.
For good.
For good.
Yeah.
And I left my stuff. I said to him, I'll come collect them tomorrow. But right now I have to go. I packed a bag and I left. And I went to visit a friend. And not long after that, I realized that I had missed my period. Now, very scary moment. I'm 17. I'm just about to turn 18 in November. And I realized I missed my period. And I eventually do a pregnancy test, and it's positive. Now, I tell him to say, look, I think I'm pregnant. He says, go back to the people that you've been with and tell them. The people that you've been with in the past couple of weeks since you haven't been here, go to those people and tell them that you're pregnant. It's got nothing to do with me. I think it ate him. I think it ate him up that it obviously is his child. So he rang me again a day or two later to say he's taking me to the hospital, to the clinic, to get a proper pregnancy test. And indeed, the results came back, and I was 6 weeks pregnant.
So then what happened?
So he then asked me what I wanted to do with the pregnancy, which was very weird because he had not asked me if I wanted to stop using protection. Yeah. So I said to him, obviously, I'm young. I don't have any resources to take care of a child financially and mentally. I'm not ready. So we decided termination was the best idea, and we agreed upon it. A day or two later, no, actually, just after that, my sister and I took a trip. We went to Durban from Swaziland, and we had the best weekend of our lives. This was on a Friday. I think when I came back on Tuesday, I found he had been looking for me because he wanted to give me the money to go and get the pregnancy terminated. And the day he came to drop off that envelope, that brown envelope, was the last day I ever saw him. He dropped it off. So while my sister and I were prepping to actually come back this side to South Africa, because in Swaziland, abortion is still illegal. So when we were just preparing to come back this side, I started getting sick. I started having cramps, and we had gone to town with my sister, and I said to her, you know what, while you run your errands, please drop me off at the hospital. I don't feel okay. And then you'll come fetch me as soon as I'm done. This was in the evening, so I went to the emergency room. and the doctor told me that I was getting a miscarriage. So that's when, and that was it. I got a miscarriage, and I didn't tell him that I got a miscarriage. Luckily, that meant I will use that money for school and other needs that I needed, other things that I needed. I don't want to say I didn't feel, I wasn't sad, but I was sad and relieved at the same time.
Yes, yes.
I was quite relieved because I think doing it myself would have
Added a layer of guilt.
Guilt, and the fact that it happened naturally was quite sad, and relieving also.
So now, what happens that you eventually find out about the status? What was it that happened? Because it's the last time you saw him.
It's the last time I saw him.
The baby's gone.
Baby's
gone. Now, you've officially been broken up for a bit.
Correct.
What happens next?
So months go by, and this was about June, July. So months go by. In August, I had left. I'd also been taken out of boarding school again after this whole episode. And I lived with a cousin.
As in kicked out?
No. I left voluntarily.
Oh, okay.
I left the hostel,
yes.
But I was still at school. I didn't get kicked out this time.
And where did you live?
So I lived not so far away, close by, with a cousin and her husband and her daughter. So when, on my way to school, there was a clinic. The school was in a very rural area. It was a boarding school in a very rural area. There was a clinic I used to pass every time I went to school. And we would go there to get a sick note. If we didn't feel like going to school, we would come back with it. I'm sick, I'm going home. And that day I walked in there, I greeted the nurse, and she says, "How can I help you today?" I said, "I want to do an HIV test." Do note, I'm not sick. I'm not really sick. I really didn't feel anything.
So why did you specifically say, "I want to do an HIV test," if your intention was to go get a sick note?
So, no. We went there usually would go there to get a sick note. But that day, I decided I want to do an HIV test.
Okay.
I can't say exactly what made me want to get an HIV test, except at the time, there were, remember those billboards that my friend with HIV is still my friend?
Yes.
There was a lot of those circulating, and there was a lot of HIV awareness adverts that were running at the time. And when you see something continuously, it eventually stays with you. I'm also very accepting of situations. So I think for me it was, I didn't expect to be positive, but I knew that I would be accepting of the situation should.
Yes.
Also, I think something that influenced me testing was before we broke up, he said to me whether he had an STI or an STI, I'm not too sure, but it didn't have anything to do with me, and he was blaming me for it.
Oh, okay.
So now there was that thought also to say, maybe what if? So I walked in there and I got tested, and the results came positive.
And how did you take that?
I don't remember the walk home.
Oh.
I don't remember how. I can't put words to it because I don't know how I felt at that moment. I do know I stayed away from school for a whole week, and I was just crying my eyes out. And I told my cousin, who was the one I was staying with, and she was very supportive. And I'm guessing then she told my mother, my guardian. So at the end of that year, I then came back to South Africa to stay with mother. And that's when I began on antiretroviral therapy.
So when you got your results, what was the first thing that came to mind with regards to your ex?
I hated him.
And mind you, I'm not even comfortable referring to him as an ex. I feel like I should be calling him a predator.
Correct.
Like your groomer,
Yes.
But just for the purposes of this conversation, for the man that you were with, what were your feelings towards him?
I hated him. I know hate is a strong word, but I hated him. I think I reached a point where I said I could have also been more responsible. It's a two-way street. Also, in as much as I was vulnerable and I knew that I had to stay and use protection, but I still hated him. I hated him because of the fact that he probably knew that he was infecting me.
Next time on Unpacked.
You infected me with HIV. He said, no, it couldn't have been me.
You know what, like, I don't want to use protection anymore.
He knew about his status. He was in denial.
Before we go there, you and I will have to go test. And at that moment, I was like, I am going to die. And it's like, this is your punishment for leaving me. And I was so defeated.
Thank you so much for watching Unpacked with Relebogile Mamoja. Make sure you subscribe to my channel where you can get to watch more episodes. But more importantly, you can be part of our online community. Comment down below, share with us who you'd like to see on the show, what story you'd like us to discuss. We love engaging with you. Keep it coming and don't forget to subscribe.